Hi, this is Dan Neides, and this is my project on why IT matters for Dr. Sarker's class, Information Systems Management. My project is going to be based on the company Barnes & Noble, and my attempt is to help you understand why IT has been so important to sustain the business at Barnes & Noble, but also for the opportunity to grow the business through the use of information technology. Carr does make several compelling points in his article, IT Doesn't Matter, especially when he looks at information technology as a commodity or utility. He points out that businesses around the world are spending over $2 trillion a year on information technology. And I think his main point is that much of the money that is being spent is wasteful. Carr uses the example of electric power in the late 1800s and early 1900s as an analogy to the current status of information technology. There was significant overproduction and extraordinary expense as companies attempted to build their own internal power plants as opposed to purchasing power, which became much less expensive as alternating currents were developed and local power plants could deliver electricity at a much lower cost. Carr goes on to state, why write your own application for word processing or email, or for that matter, supply chain management, when you can buy a ready-made state-of-the-art application for a fraction of the cost? He continues, more and more companies will fulfill their IT requirements simply by purchasing fee-based web services from third parties, similar to the way they currently buy electric power or telecommunication services. So yes, I can certainly agree with Carr's point as it pertains to hardware and software development as well as storage of data. There does seem to be an incredible amount of redundancy, and it might be more cost effective for companies to outsource these areas of their businesses instead of trying to develop them internally. However, for companies to be able to compete in a global economy, innovation will be driven by information technology. So let's look at Barnes & Noble as an example of how a company was able to use information technology innovation to drive businesses to new heights. In 2007, the first e-reader was introduced to the market, and Barnes & Noble quickly took notice. In 2009, they launched the Nook, which is their version of the electronic reader. Let's take a look at the fiscal years 2007 and 2008 for Barnes & Noble. As we can see, in 2007, they had total sales of $5.3 billion with an operating profit of $202 million. However, in the subsequent year, 2008, their total sales dropped to $5.1 billion and an operating profit of just over $143 million. Here was an opportunity for Barnes & Noble to seize new business and grow the franchise based on new information technology, i.e., the e-reader. The beauty of Barnes & Noble's strategy was that it combined their online presence with their brick-and-mortar bookstores. Customers had two options. They could read about the Nook online and determine if they wanted to purchase it based on what they saw, or Barnes & Noble strategically placed the in-store display so that when you walked into any Barnes & Noble, you would automatically be drawn to this beautiful display. The other interesting thing that Barnes & Noble did was they took their first e-reader, which was a black and white device, and quickly made it into the Nook color. So for a price point of only $50 more, customers who wanted a more elaborate looking screen could certainly do so. And lastly, they turned the Nook color into a tablet. By incorporating software into the device, customers had an opportunity to use the Nook color very quickly as an alternative to their competitors' tablets. Using existing technology, Barnes & Noble was very quickly able to take their simple e-reader and turn it into a tablet device in only 18 months and at a price point that was 50% less than the Apple iPad. And although it doesn't have the same capability as the iPad, this was a much less expensive alternative to people who wanted an introduction into the e-reader / tablet technology. So what was the strategic advantage to Barnes & Noble when using this information technology to grow business? As you can see, the stock index decreased significantly from 2008 to 2009 prior to the introduction of the Nook. Once the Nook was introduced, the value of the stock began to increase and the company's sales started to grow dramatically. When I last showed you financial statements from Barnes & Noble, we saw a significant decline in revenue from 2008 to 2009. So let's look at what has occurred from 2009 to 2011. In 2009, as mentioned before, Barnes & Noble had a total revenue of $5.1 billion. In 2010, that increased to $5.8 billion, and in 2011, they were just shy of $7 billion in total revenue. Their gross profit, again, rose from $1.58 billion in 2009 to $1.8 billion in 2011. We can certainly attribute much of their success to the enhancements of BarnesandNoble.com and the introduction of the Nook Color, and the Nook tablet. In 18 months, their e-book market grew 27% as compared to a 19% share of the physical book marketplace. While booksellers around the world suffered significant sales declines, Barnes & Noble's sales increased by 1% due to the sales of digital products and the expansion of their toys and games department. Also, BarnesandNoble.com saw a sales increase of 65% for the 2010-2011 year, led by their rapidly growing e-content business. So this ultimately brings us back to Carr's argument. He does see a trend in information technology that mirrors electric power in railways. And yes, there are incredible redundancies and underutilization of information technology in businesses. In order for businesses to be competitive, they will have to be able to identify areas where they can lower cost. Information technology may be one area where expenses can be reduced. Developing new hardware, new software, or new data storage facilities may not be necessary for most companies. However, having the basic information technology infrastructure to be able to develop new innovations is a way for companies to be able to increase their profit margins. I think Barnes & Noble has given us one significant example of how information technology was able to grow business at a time when retail sales were on a decline. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and thank you for watching and listening.